Well, I know many of you are doing the the TD Concord, and I've seen people trying to get in. Our guest speaker today is Darran Bowles from the Football Association, and Darran will go on and explain some of the roles he's had through the Football Association. Darran is a dad of two, a husband. He's worked at Blackburn, he's worked at Bolton, and he's a fantastic coach educator. He's a fantastic man, and he's an even better friend. Darran is the type of man that will drive an hour to meet with you for 10 minutes to have a coffee and stuff like that. So we're very blessed and lucky to have Darran with us. And Darran, if you want to explain your role a little bit, and then go on with the presentation, and I'll share the screen. So firstly, Darran, on behalf of Rush Nation and everybody else who's joining us or will watch this, thank you very much for everything you've done for the game and for the role that you've played in my development as well. So thank you. And then go on with the presentation, and I'll share the screen. So firstly, Darran, on behalf of Rush Nation and everybody else who's joining us or will watch this, thank you very much for everything you've done for the game and for the role that you've played in my development as well. So thank you.
Okay, folks, thank you.
The presentation, and I'll share the screen. So firstly, Darran, on behalf of Rush Nation and everybody else who's joining us or will watch this, thank you very much for everything you've done for the game and the role that you've played in my development as well. So I'm going to mute my microphone, Darran.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. Afternoon, everybody. I'm informed that you're all connected from across the different states in America. So nice to speak to you all, and I'll try my best to just brighten up the next 45 minutes with some of the ideas that I've put together in the presentation that Chris asked us to do quite some time ago now. I think it was a few months before Christmas, so hopefully I'll do myself justice with what I put together. So here goes. Chris kind of asked me if I would look at what counts, what matters when establishing what we call a culture of development or a culture of excellence, particularly in grassroots football. So currently I work for the Football Association. I'm one of a number of coach developers that are working specifically with a particular county FA. So in my case, it's Cheshire, which is in the northwest of England. So that's quite a big county. But in addition to my role with the FA, I'm also an active coach. Currently work with a group of under 12 players in a grassroots club which is based somewhere near Blackburn, which again is in the northwest of England. So that's just a little bit about my background, what I do professionally, and then what I do in my spare time. So just with regards to the presentation, so hopefully Chris is going to scroll through. So on the second slide, kind of going to look at what this culture of development actually means. So looking at it from an FA perspective, but also from a grassroots perspective. And as I've said previously, I'm an active coach. The club that I coach at is called Brinscall Village. What I'll then have a look at is what's required to achieve the culture of development. I've just called that the nuts and bolts. And then finally, what I'll try and do is then look at how we might measure the impact of what we're doing. So there's going to be three considerations.
Thanks, Darran. I'm just trying to get the screen up, so bear with me. It says screen share, but then all it's got is okay. So I'm going to try and pull this up, Darran. Travis, what can you guys see right now?
I'm looking at it. I don't see anything really.
Okay. Bear with me, guys.
No problem, Chris.
No, big problem, Darran. That technology. I don't believe in it. Check my website. So let's have a look. Opening showcase.
I'll put myself on pause.
Yeah. Okay, that's not it. Okay, what about now?
Yeah, that's the opening slide. So
Okay.
if you scroll down to the third slide, please, Chris.
Yep.
That's where I'm up to.
Fantastic. Thanks, Darran.
Smashing. Okay, so we'll start again. So just as I was saying, I'm going to look at, if you will, this culture of development from two perspectives. Look at it from a governing body perspective. So that's with my, if you will, with my professional eyes, and then also what I'll do is then look at it from a grassroots perspective. So that's what I do in my spare time, working with the under 12s at a local club to where I live. So just from an FA perspective, just highlighted 4 areas there. At the top you'll see it says FA Charter Standard Club Programme. That's what exists right across the country. Any grassroots club can look to try and achieve what's called Charter Standard Club status. Going to talk about that in a little bit more detail on some of the later slides. Also look at some things from an England DNA perspective. So this was something that was introduced pre-Christmas. It's what the whole organisation has embraced in terms of what it stands for, what it's trying to do in terms of player and coach development. And then what I'll touch on is a little bit around coach education and coach development, which is what I'm doing in my role as a county coach developer, as I said before, in Cheshire. So if we just move on to the 4th slide. For those of you that have got no knowledge of this Charter Standard Club Programme, it's now been going almost 15 years, so it's well established. Those are the broad aims, but essentially it was about raising standards of coaching across grassroots clubs, right up and down the country, but also impacting on what goes on behind the scenes in many grassroots clubs in terms of the administration, creating the right environment for the players, and essentially raising the behaviour throughout the game. There's 3 levels which clubs can look to aspire to, those being youth, which is for those clubs who've got a small number of teams, might have single figure numbers of teams, and then the development status, which is what the club where I do my coaching has achieved. So we've got about 16, 17 teams, which is relatively small, I know, but we're probably small to medium size in terms of the amount of football that we provide. And then what you've got is community charter standard status. Those are for bigger clubs that have got larger numbers of teams across multiple age groups. For each level, there's different criteria. And on the next slide, you can just see there so if you just move it on, Chris, for a basic charter standard youth club, there are certain criteria with regards to the numbers of coaches who are expected to have minimum coaching qualifications. And what's happened last season, the current season that we're in, but last year, is that there's now some new criteria for clubs, and you can see those there on the right-hand side of that table, just in terms of the percentage of coaches who would be members of the licensed coaches club, and how many coaches would have achieved the module 1 of our youth award, which I'm going to explain a little bit more about shortly. So that's just your criteria for your basic charter standard clubs. Of course, for development and community, the criteria becomes a little bit more challenging, but essentially that's to improve the quality of provision that a grassroots club is making. So if we just move on to the next slide, that's actually taken from the FA's last, if you will, coaching strategy, and that's the vision for coaches. So quite simply, it's about training, about developing and qualifying, and then supporting innovative coaches. Essentially, we want them to be excellent teachers of the game, whether they're working in grassroots football or whether they're working in professional game, where they're a paid coach. So I talked before a little bit about the England DNA, which was introduced last calendar year. there's 5 elements. As you can see on those hexagons there, it's about who we are. So what do we stand for as an organisation? How do we play? So what sort of approach, how we would like our teams to play the game. The future England players, so what types of players we're looking to develop. And then the final 2 would be how we coach, which is very important. You know, what sort of behaviours, what sort of approaches should we take as a coach with the players that we're working with. And then lastly would be how we support those players. So not only you know, our work on the pitch, but what we're doing off the pitch. So those would be the 5 core elements of the England DNA. And if we just look in particular, so just moving on to the next slide, that would be just a descriptor of the coaching and the training strategy. So it's about creating the best practice environment, certainly in all areas, whether that's on the pitch or whether that's off the pitch. And it's about preparing the players and the teams to be successful and, you know, ultimately reach their potential. So if we just move on again, Chris. In terms of that coaching and training strategy model, what you can see there is just a very simple plan, do, review model. That's what we're encouraging, you know, all coaches to follow. In some sense, you know, the amount of time that you can afford to your planning will impact on what you then do. So the delivery, that's the bit that we all, of course, enjoy. And then the third piece would be then just making sure that you review and reflect on what you're doing with your players to help with your planning for your next session and what you're moving on to. The next slide just lists some of the coaching fundamentals that we've certainly put into place. Just flip back one, Chris. Flip back one slide. Yeah, thanks, Chris. So that's our coaching fundamentals. There's 12 there. I'm not going to go through each of those in detail, but essentially what we're trying to do is we're trying to get coaches to embrace those and certainly try and put those into practice when they're working with the players. So, for example, in the bottom right-hand corner, it says aim for a minimum of 70% ball rolling time in your sessions. So what does that mean? Maximise the amount of time that you've got with your players by encouraging them to be active and play the game. So it's as simple as that. So if we just move on to the next slide. In terms of my role as a coach developer, large part of it is about coach education. There's a range of different courses that are available to grassroots coaches. Those that I've listed on that particular slide, I'm responsible for delivering those. And what I've highlighted in particular is Module 1, which is about developing the environment. It's been well received. It's certainly had a massive impact on coaches, not only in grassroots game, but also those in professional game. And it's that first part of our youth award. Essentially, I've tried to illustrate where it sits and where it fits. So the photo on the slide there, it puts the game at the heart of everything that we do, and we're then trying to create the right environment. We're working with the players, and of course, we're trying to ensure that we get the right practices for the players, dependent on their age, their ability, and where what phase they're at in their development. So hopefully that illustrates, if you will, our youth award. If we just move on to the next slide, that's just again a visual of Module 1 and where it fits with the other 2 modules. So once we've looked at developing the environment, we then look at developing the practice, which is Module 2, and then Module 3 is about developing the player and the players within the team. And I've just tried to illustrate there what are the key components of Module 1. So a number of workshops that look at social corner, how players learn, managing mistakes, motivation, self-esteem. That's a 4-day course. There's a combination of workshops, but also a lot of practical work that draws out the key thinking that we share with the coaches in the workshops that I've shown there. So if we just move on to the next slide. As I said at the start of the presentation, I'm one of a number of coach developers that are working across the country. So there's 40 of us. We're now integral to that delivery of coach education. We provide ongoing support to grassroots coaches. That's done through various different workshops where we're looking for coaches that have got qualifications to continue their professional development. And they're all based around those 5 core elements of the England DNA that I've talked about before. So that's just a very quick insight into, I guess, my perspective of developing this culture of development as somebody who works for the governing body. And what I'm now going to do is just talk through some of the things that we've done in the grassroots club where I'm a volunteer. So if we just move on to the next slide. If you just move it on again, Chris. Yeah, just move it on again. Yeah, so the club where I'm a volunteer is Brinscoll Village. Pretty small. It's not a town. It is a village. It was set up a number of years ago, quite ironically by the parent of a player who I coached when I was a part-time academy coach at Blackburn Rovers. Kind of interesting how things work out that I'm now coaching there, and I've got involved as a coach because my son started playing football when he was 6 years of age. So the club has its own unique DNA. I think it's fair to say that they've got some consistent and what we described as being correct values, beliefs and behaviours. So essentially the volunteers that are involved, good people, and good people make good coaches. The players, what we try and have is a player-centred approach, and what I'll talk about is some of the key ingredients and what that means. And then lastly, I'll just touch a little bit around some of the things that we try to encourage with our coaches, our parents, and the guardians of the players that are members of the club. So if we just move on, Chris. So what I've tried to do, this would have been at some point last season, given my role at the FA, having some knowledge of the England DNA that was going to be launched, I just began to look at it from a grassroots perspective, and what would it mean for a club of our size with the amount of volunteers and the amount of players that we've got involved. So what you can see there are those 5 hexagons that I talked about before. We've changed a little bit of the wording. So the one at the top is who we are. So just a very, very simple and concise description of what we are as a club. So without reading it through, I think it sort of sums up what we're trying to do in terms of the environment we're creating and what we're trying to do in terms of encouraging the players to learn. If you look across on the right-hand side, it's then how we play. Respect is a key part of that for sure. And then just in terms of our approach to our games programme, winning games is not our priority. We think our success is going to be measured on the improvement of the individual players and the team as a whole across those 4 corners of development, and being technical, physical, the psych and the social. So that's just how we play. Our players, we certainly want our players to take some responsibility for their own learning and development. They've got to have a positive approach, whether that's in the games programme or it's in training sessions, and they've got to demonstrate the appropriate behaviours. We encourage them to make their own decisions, and we really do want them to fulfil their potential as young people, both on and off the pitch. So good standards for them set all the time. The next hexagon, bottom left, is just how we support. So what we're trying to certainly encourage with all our volunteers is promoting that culture of excellence. The volunteers get supported, so if they want to get qualified, the club does fund them, and then we just expect the commitment back in terms of their volunteering. And I think that just it really does contribute and emphasise what we're trying to do in terms of supporting the players. If we support the volunteers, we're giving everybody the best possible chance to succeed. And then lastly, just our coaches. We're a fairly small group of coaches because of the number of teams that are operating, but essentially we're all parents. There's very few coaches that haven't got children who play in the club. So we're all there for a particular reason in terms of contributing something back to the community. What we've tried to encourage is that player development's at the core of our philosophy, and that we want to try our very, very best to improve the skills and attributes of the players that we're working with, whether that's in training sessions or whether it's on game day or the social activities that we get involved with. And we just want to be professional and hope that all the volunteer coaches represent the club in a positive and a professional manner at all times. So that now has become our club DNA. It's very simple. It's one page. That's what we share with parents. That's what we share with other clubs and anybody that's interested to find out what we're doing. So if we just flick to the next slide. This is kind of something which I've put together specifically for the age group that I oversee, and perhaps the team that I work with. We've come up with the acronym PACE. We want the players to have speed of body and mind. What does that mean? Well, we're looking for excellent performance, great attitude, the right commitment, and heaps of effort. And if we can get those four ingredients right, and we've got that consistent approach across our coaching sessions and games, then we think we'll get the development of the kids moving in the right direction. So we introduced that this season. We shared it with the boys. They liked it. We then shared it with the parents. They bought into it, and it seems to be going well. If we just flick to the next slide. Well, we can do a lot of talking, but I guess that sums up what our key ingredients look like. So we've got a little visual. Effort's at the heart of everything they want the players to do. That's the one thing that they control. At the bottom of the pyramid there, you can see attitude and commitment. So they're going to be the foundations. And if we can get those first three ingredients working correctly, then we'll get the right performance, and that'll be at the tip of the pyramid. Running through everything we do, we want the kids to demonstrate the right behaviours. You know, whether that's on a training session with the teammates, or whether that's in a games program where we're playing against other teams. So get the right behaviours, both at training and at games. We think we've got a good chance of developing some good young people and some good players. If we just move to the next two slides, again, this is something which I've put together. It's about those good habits. It's looking at things from a four-corner perspective, which is again something which the governing body, the FA's, introduced some years ago. And I've sort of put this together, shared it with the players. It's about having good habits on the pitch. So you can see the four corners there. If we look at the bottom right-hand corner, the social corner, as an example, on the pitch, we want the boys to enjoy the game. We want them to, you know, show respect for other teams, be a good sports person, respect the officials, show that good behaviour that we're encouraging, and hopefully have fun. And we think if we can get them doing that on the pitch and working in that social corner, we've got a good chance of seeing some improvement. And as you can then see, we've got other things that are going on in the technical corner, the physical corner, and also the site corner. So without labouring the point. If we just move to the next slide. So similarly, off the pitch, we've got that four-corner approach. So if we take the physical corner, which is bottom left, for example, what we're trying to encourage the players to do off the pitch, well, we want them to look after themselves. You know, we want them to make sure that they're getting lots of rest before they play. Quite important for the boys that I'm working with. They're under 12, so they're first year high school. They're beginning to enter their growth spurts. We've got all sorts of different shapes and sizes, so clearly making sure that they get rest or encouraging their parents to make sure that they get rest before the play is important. We want them to try and eat healthy things, have a good diet, and we do want them to make sure that they're thinking about what they're drinking plenty. So just really some simple habits that the boys can get into and hopefully the parents buy into. So as you can see, there's content in each of the other three corners there. So if we just move on again. I mentioned before about our coaches. We want the right people. We want good people. Pretty much everybody's parents. Those people who aren't parents, if they're other volunteers, we just want people who care about the players. So simple stuff. In terms of the provision of support and what we do as a club for our volunteers, we do provide funding to achieve the FA qualifications. So everybody's got to get the minimum quals and retain what we call prerequisites, so emergency first aid and safeguarding. We do have in-house CPD sessions. They happen from time to time. I generally get asked to do those, but there's a couple of other volunteers who also experience. Got a guy who works as a teacher, got another guy that's worked for a professional club in their community department. So occasionally they do some in-house CPD. And we also have some informal mentoring where we try our best to provide advice, good practice, ideas, and just sharing contacts. So very informal. I do a bit of that with the two volunteer parents that help me and a couple of the other age groups. If we move on to the next slide. So our parents and guardians, if we want this culture of development, we recognise that they're key to it. You know, they bring the boys to training, so we certainly make sure that we try and communicate with them on a weekly basis. We have a club website. Fair to say that that's not really that well used. I think individual age groups, they communicate in different ways with their parents and their players. For example, I use social media, so we've got a closed Facebook group which seems to be pretty effective, keeping parents up to date with games program, how the boys are progressing. But we do have plenty of informal contact at training and games. One of the key things is just managing the expectations of the parents. I guess I'm pretty experienced, been coaching 26 years now, so I've learnt along the way, whether that was working in professional game or more recently, you know, in grassroots football. You've got to manage the expectations of the parents. They all think the boys are going to become the next professional player. That's maybe not going to be the case. It's just about developing them to reach their potential. So we have an informal get-together at the start of the season where we share goals with the boys, with the parents. You know, we just encourage the parents to ask questions just to make sure that they're happy with how things are going to look over the course of the season. Do involve and share feedback with the parents. That can be done on match days, where we'll invite them to come and listen to, you know, the team talk before the game, or if we're, you know, sharing feedback with the boys after the match. We've got quite a busy social calendar. We've got different social events that happen throughout the season. I'm sure that some of you guys, you know, encourage and make that happen. We've taken the boys this season to watch couple of live games, Football League games, England game, and then we do have some fundraising activities. So it's just working in that social corner, just giving the boys and their parents a good experience around the club. So if we just move on to the next slide. So going back to our original considerations, if we questioned what does a culture of development actually mean, I tried to sum it up. It's the right learning environment, certainly where everyone feels as though they're part of something and they're contributing to something special. Whether you're a coach, whether you're a young referee, whether you're a parent of a player or ultimately the players, we just want them to feel part of something that they're going to remember in years to come. What's required to achieve this culture of development? Just a clear and simple club DNA that everybody buys into. So the example that I showed you, one page, very clear, very simple, shared that with the coaches, and that's displayed on our website, and we share that with parents. Consistent messages that are shared between players, coaches, parents, other volunteers is critical, and it is important that you have what I described as joined up approach. It's linking your coaching sessions to the games and vice versa. So when I finished this evening, I'm hot-footing it to my coaching session. Starts at 7 o'clock our time, so I guess that's probably 2 o'clock your time. And tonight we'll be working on some simple things, and we've got a friendly game arranged on Saturday, and we'll just look in that game to make sure that the boys are continuing to put into practice what we're asking them to do this evening. So that joined up approach is really important. And just moving to the final slide, how do we measure the impact of what we do and measure, if you will, or check to see whether we're having an impact? Quite simple. Are the players, are the coaches remaining with the club and the team? So are they continuing to be involved at our club? Hopefully, the 14 players that I've got playing will still be with us next season, barring one or two of them moving on into a professional club academy. We'd always welcome that. We'd encourage that if that was the right exit route for the boys. Certainly happened last season where we had a young player who'd made really good progress, and he's gone to Blackburn Rovers Academy last season. And we're optimistic that we've got 2 or 3 more boys that that could happen for them at some point going forward. So we want them to be involved with our club, or certainly involved in the game. We do monitor their attendance. So if we're getting regular attendance at training and at games, we like to think that we're doing something right. So sounds simple, but very, very important. Improved behaviours both on and off the pitch, and that could be at home or it could be at school. So we realise that we've got an important part to play in the development of the boys. It's your role as a coach. We might see them for a minimal amount of time each week, but we can have an important impact, certainly in terms of their behaviour. Whether that's at home or at school. And lastly, we're trying to observe. We're trying to recognise whether we've got improved performance at training, and is that being transferred into games. We try and do that on an individual basis, and we try and do it on a collective basis as a team. So whilst we say that winning is important, development is more important. It sounds simple. It should be simple. If the boys are improving individually and they're improving as a team, we think the results will take care of themselves as they progress through the age groups. So we're not sophisticated in terms of how we might record that improvement. We're not producing individual player reports to give to the players, give to the parents. It's kind of very informal, and I think very often, the parents can see that the boys are improving on and off the pitch. And I think in most cases, that's a pretty good indicator. You use your eyes, and your observational skills as a coach. And if you can see that the boys are improving with their performances, both training and in games, we'd like to think that we're making progress. So that kind of brings things to some point of conclusion. Hopefully, I've done myself justice. It's probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of what that culture of development means. It's not a quick fix. It's something that you need to do year on year, season on season, and it's about consistency of approach, consistency of behaviours, and hopefully that breeds improvement, and it breeds that culture of development of excellence. So hopefully that's kind of giving you a little bit of insight into what goes on in this grey matter between my ears. Hopefully it's given you some food for thought, a little bit of inspiration, and if Chris kind of invites me to do something again during the future, that'd be great.
Thanks, Darran. Travis and Idaho crew and the few others that are watching, do you guys have any questions for Darran, knowing that obviously he's got a bit of a timeline that he needs to get to training and stuff like that? Travis, no questions?
No, I don't think so. I think it covered everything. I thought it was good. I was interested in the part where you actually don't do evaluations with the players. I thought that was pretty unique and different, where we're always like giving evaluations and everybody wants to know how's my kid. So it's kind of good to hear that's not necessarily a formal thing all the time.
I think the important thing on that, Travis, is to note that what Darran does is, which I liked, is bring the parents in to kind of share the team talk, and then bring them in afterwards, because then the evaluation and the feedback and the assessment's always ongoing.
Right.
So I don't think you need the written form of an evaluation that we fall into the habits of doing over here.
Right.
Just to kind of clarify that, I guess the boys, when they're at school, or players, they get plenty of reports made about them by teachers.
Yeah.
When they come to play football, they come to escape. They come to love the game, learn stuff, be with the pals, and they want to get better. So it's probably a conscious decision that we don't do a formal report. I do know there are examples of coaches up and down the country in different clubs, whether that's grassroots, that they will do those reports. I'm not so sure whether that's necessary. We're trying to make sure that the kids have a love of the game, and if you can provide that feedback verbally in an informal way with the boys and the parents, and I think that probably achieves what you're trying to do.
So it's a little different on our model, Darran, because it is pay to play, right? So even the youth soccer club over here is pay to play, unless it's a recreational based where it's a parent volunteer coach, which is a big base of our club. Approximately 1,500 children. So it's expected at the competitive levels, and I say competitive levels, whether you're playing in our club, we expect everybody to compete. The only thing is we'd like to win. We compete to win, but we want to win through development, and winning becomes a byproduct of what you've done in training, and becomes important at 16 for us. But in a very competitive American market, where they want to win at tiddlywinks, if you're not winning, they do jump clubs. However, I think if we establish and show them, hey, this is our club culture, this is our club DNA, these are our expectations, the more we can share our expectations, I think people want to belong to an organization that stands for something and puts the child first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, just while we're on that player-centered approach, Darran, can you give us a couple of minutes, and explain that? So, real simply, what we've done here at Virginia Rush is we've just agreed upon between the directors of coaching that we're going to put the person first. Therefore, we're putting the player second, which is easy because we're looking after the person. And if we're developing the person, it's easier to develop the player. After the player comes the team, then the age group, then the club. And that way, if we're looking after all those things in turn, you know, we're not going to do anybody any wrong, and you know, we're promoting that, you know, that player-centered approach as you talk about.
Yeah, and that sort of makes sense, that you've got almost that hierarchy. So if you put the person first, you've got a pretty good chance of trying to develop them as a player. You know, and to my detriment, or if you will, my cost, I've learned, if you do not, you know, take the time out to get to know the player and what makes them tick, and that's quite difficult if you're only seeing them for a couple of occasions during the week. You're not going to give yourself the best possible chance to develop them as players. I certainly learned that when I worked in professional game, because that was about, you know, producing players that were hopefully going to progress through the age groups and ultimately become, you know, full-time scholars. And just going back to kind of, you know, Travis, you asked about reporting. The boys that are in the academy program in England, certainly now with EPPP that's been introduced, the coaches are expected to record feedback on each individual player that's within an age group squad, and they're doing that on a weekly basis. So they're evaluating player performance, and they're then recording that, so that each player's almost got like a coaching timeline. So if they begin at a club as an enthusiastic under 10 and then progress through to under 15s, but then a release from that club and move on to another one, they will take that pathway with them. So coaches that are working in the academy program, yes, they're paid, but a large amount of their time is about recording the progress of the individual players. And it's required, but it's probably taking away some of the time and the impact that the coach needs to have just working with the players, rather than sat there inputting information onto a spreadsheet on a computer. But that's, I guess, how that's the nature of the business now. And certainly EPPP has demanded that. Grassroots, in my experience, you're dealing with volunteers, and the volunteers have only got a certain amount of disposable time, and that's best spent, you know, just being around the kids and trying to improve them. So it's not a cop-out. I guess it's an explanation of maybe why you don't do it.
Thanks, Darran. So, Darran, just switching gear a little, if we were looking to get you over to do some coaching education in the summer, what might be a good month? And how do we go about getting you?
It'd have to be a quiet month.
Okay.
I'd have to work out a quiet month.
All right.
You know, it'd be great. I'd like to come and do a bit of delivery.
Yeah.
Always enthusiastic.
I hear July is great in Colorado.
That's when we have our big Rush Festival, Darran. And what we do is so there's 35 Rush clubs around the country, the US, and then there's 30 around the world. So domestically at under 12, rising to under 13, and what we do is we have this big festival where we indoctrinate the kids in the Rush way, the Rush style of playing, the Rush core values, and all those kinds of things. So, you know, that's why Trav's throwing out July is a good month. But it's quite unique, and it shows the uniqueness and the size of our club. But you know, the federation has impressed upon us that there's going to be some changes, and we're going to move to calendar year now. We currently run a league that runs July through August through July, but the birth year
Yep.
it's actually going to change to birth year. So
Okay.
the country's in a little bit of a tizzy, and then in 2017 they're going to curtail, which I love that word. They're going to curtail heading at under the ages of 13. So yeah, sorry, I won't ask you to comment on that because this is a live broadcast. But there's more to be said on that. But just real quick before I open up the floor again for further questions, and again being sensitive to your time. Thoughts on kids playing up. So obviously that I just presented at the NSCAA convention, which Steve Rutter was in on our presentation, and a big smile came up on his face when I mentioned your name, and some kind words were exchanged. What are your thoughts on, I know it's a case-by-case basis, but here in America we have, you've got relative age effect, but then we've got relative deprivation. People want to play up because Billy next door is playing up. And what, in your experience and in your thoughts, what are your thoughts on that? And obviously the consideration of the social aspects, which I saw as one of your 4 corners, which I thought was brilliant, by the way. Just in a nutshell, being sensitive to your time, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. In my experience, it very much depends on the individual. It depends on why you're moving them up. So I've got a boy at the moment who physically is an early developer. No question, if he was moved up an age group, he would be able to deal with the demands of the game from a physical perspective, because he's kind of exhibiting the physicality of somebody who's not an under 12, who's an under 13, and a 13-year-old boy. However, his motivation for playing in our team is to be with his friends.
Social.
So that's the social core.
Yep.
So you've always got a dilemma that actually, if he was in a professional club, physically he could contend with playing up an age group, and in his own age group, so far this season, in terms of his games playing, technical corner, he's been outstanding. So you would want to move him up, but because he's in the grassroots game, and the reason that children play predominantly in grassroots football and why they start playing is to be with their friends. So the dilemma is, do you go and speak to his parents and say, look, he's quite capable of playing up, we'll move him up in our under 13s, which there's a case for.
Does he have the ability, Darran? Does he have the ability to play for both? I mean, so in the US, what we're doing is we're catering programs towards the player. So if they've got a game day schedule, we target events that this child can go and play up. Do you know what I mean? Do you have that ability in England, or?
Yeah, you could do that. What you've got to do is just got to monitor that not playing too much.
Yeah.
And in the case of the boy that I've used as an example, he's playing for his school. He's also involved in other sports. So you've got to manage very carefully that he's not doing too much, because even though he's grown and he's an early developer, he's still not really entered the main part of puberty and his growth spurts. But you can't get away from the fact that most children play football to be with the pals. That's the biggest driver for them. And I bet if you ask the player, do you want to go and play up in the older age group, even though technically and physically they can contend with it, 9 times out of 10 they'll want to continue playing with the friends. Now, for Joseph, he would be somebody that potentially next season he could move into not just our under 13s. He could end up progressing into professional game. the issue is nobody's seen him yet, because your talent ID, your scouts that are out there have not spotted him. So I'm quite fortunate because I've got knowledge and expertise of working in professional game, and I see somebody that's very capable. At this moment in time, he's probably in the best place he could be. And then when he progresses next season, so we'll begin to play 11-a-side next season as under 13s. We have an option to play that. A season with us as an under 13, he'll be more than ready to make that step to a higher level of football. But if you look in grassroots football, it's very rare that players move up or down because they want to play with their peer group. They want to play with their friends, unless, and I guess you're in a sort of middle ground position, because you're almost like an academy, but not a club, so you can afford to move your players around. You can afford to stream them because you've got the numbers to do it. But ultimately, it comes back to what's right for the individual.
Yeah.
And if the individual says, "No, I'm not going," even though you might be saying, "Well, technically, physically, you tick all the boxes," actually, they might not be ready for it from a psycho and social perspective.
Yeah. So what we currently face here in the States, Darran, is parents pushing their kids up, wanting their kids up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And not the sensible approach at times of saying, no, they're not ready yet. So part of my job has been, hey, not yet.
Yeah.
So I'm a big one of believing that kids play in their own age group, get the success, become that big fish in the small pond. So for example, we've got some quite talented, believe it or not, under sixes. Well, they play under 6, they can score 15 goals, or we bounce them up to play under 8 where they're playing 4v4, right?
Yeah.
So they do that. Now, it's taken a while to get that culture going, but people know that. So we're giving them value added, and I'll say to them, hey, what is it you do for a living, right? Well, I'm an accountant. Well, do I come over and tell you how to run your books? No. So as the learned person in this field. So it's changing cultures and it's getting there. So, but Darran, listen, I want to thank you for your time, and again for the role you played in my development as a person and as a coach. And on behalf of Rush Soccer, thanks for joining us. We will definitely take you up on getting you on again. We'd love to have it, and I'd like it, if you can, to do a little bit about mentoring coaches, because many of us work with volunteer coaches, and I'd love it if you could, talk about the mentor program a little bit, and if we could shoot for a June timeline in the hope of getting you over for July, and stuff like that. And again, let me know sizes of Joe and Amelia, and I'll get some stuff over. And I might be over in the summer. So in the Derbyshire area with Tommy Statham, who's just won the Foundation Coach of the Year award, and he was he had to go up, and so there's hope of seeing you in the summer. And again, thank you on everybody that was on the call, and enjoy the training tonight.
Thanks, Chris. Nice to meet you, Thomas.
See you guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.